Hello everyone, today in this video, as in every case on this channel, we will fight against the utmost character of our world around us. Today we will discuss the history that took place on the great territory that is ranging from central or even western Ukraine till the Gobi Desert in China. I mean the great territory called Great Steppe. On this area, millions of square kilometers, millions of square miles, as Northern Americans would say as well, many nations experience their own history, were interacting with each other, not only not only on in the military manner, but also in terms of cultural exchange, religious exchange, trade, cooperation, mixing with each other, because on such great territory, many ethnic groups and races and types of human appearance were and are still existing. Many nations were the result of mixing of different groups between each other with each other. Many of them were also connected with some cultural and religious value with each other, and many ideas from the West through these nations traveled to the East and vice versa. One of the greatest historians of the Great Steppe was the Russian philologist, the son of the great poet Anna Akhmatova. He lived in the years 1912 to 1992, and he was studying Oriental studies in Russia. Later focused on Persian language, but not only. His linguistic skills allowed him to access the sources connected with the history of the nations of the Great Steppe. And he wrote a book that in English was translated as In the Search of the Kingdom of the Prester John. This book is about the story of many nations from this territory and their interactions with civilized world like Persia, China, European countries, up to Poland and Germany. This what I like in this book is the fact that Mr. Gumilev doesn't dodge controversial topics like races, like ethnic groups and their ethnogenesis, so the way how they were created, like the like the physical appearance of these nations. When he can extract such information from the sources, he presents it as the sources claim that, and luckily his work is free of the bias in this area of history connected with races and ethnicity that spread around the Western world after Second World War, especially since the end of 1960s, that actually many historians are afraid of touching this topic because they are afraid of being heavily criticized or even kicked out from the job because of doing their job properly. Luckily, in Russia, in the late 60s and early 70s, when this book was written, and even now, investigating ethnical identity of nations of the past, it's not a problem and it's not a controversial issue. Of course, Mr. Gumilov had his own biases. For instance, for him, the Western European nations are portrayed in a very negative light. Very often, actually, it's true, like the sack of the Constantinople and the negative approach of papal authorities to the possible joint attack on Muslim countries, uh, joint attack of Mongol and Crusader forces. Only Bohemund VI, the Count of Tripoli, joined Mongol forces that were defeated by Mamluks in the battle in 1260 AD under Ain Jalut, great battle that decided later the fate that was cruel of Nestorian Christians, who were later decimated by the victorious Muslims. And the funny thing is that the Bohemund who joined Mongol crusades, led by Hulagu and Kitboga, Mongol crusaders in quotation, who were mainly Nestorians, the soldiers, was later condemned by the Pope, and he had to pay heavy price for his deed, that he joined the Mongol expedition against Mamluks. And Mr. Gumilev also expresses very much pro-Russian and pro-steppe views, which are actually typical to Russian patriots. So reading his works, we have to take it into account that he has such point of view, but his negative approach to other civilizations disappears, and objectivity comes into play when he analyzes the story and the complicated ethnogenesis process of many Asian nations. And his book I am now talking about covers the period of the history of the steppe from the 9th century AD till the end of the 13th century AD. Very nicely, the rise of Jingiskhan is described. The role of Jamukha in the process of Genghis Khan's rising to power is actually controversial, and the solution Mr. Gumilev proposed about the role of Jamukha in the final battle between the army of Genghis Khan and aristocratic forces, in which the second forces, aristocratic forces led by Jamukha, were defeated. Mr. Gumilev just delivers the hypothesis that Jamukha was the agent of Genghis Khan. Very strange hypothesis, but worth debating and worth considering. That's why I really like this book, because maybe I don't agree with every hypothesis or interpretation presented there, but at least they are intellectually challenging and thought-provoking. That's why such books are worth reading. So this is very important. An approach to description of ethnogenesis and the interactions between steppe nations and the influence of the climate change on their history and their moves and behavior, like in case of Yakuts, people who are of Turkic origin, but now they are living on Siberia, and linguistically they are quite isolated from their Siberian neighbors. And this is because they were in the 8th, 9th century the inhabitants of Great Steppe, but from time to time steppe is drying out, so they couldn't find more food for themselves, so they emigrated along Great Siberian rivers on the north to Taiga territory, and they settled down. Many interesting informations we can find in this book. That's why In the Search of the Legendary Kingdom of Prester John by Lev Gumilev, it's really very good read, highly recommended, very much challenging and distant from the ideological limitations which are now unfortunately dominant in majority of institutions in the Western world. Of course, it has some biases and limitations, like really anti-Western sentiment, and there are some simplifications, like there is a thing mentioned that in 1241 Mongols defeated German soldiers in the Battle of Legnica. Actually, the German soldiers were only auxiliary forces to main Polish forces that unsuccessfully faced Mongol invasion in this battle. But Mr. Gumilev, and he openly claims that in his other books, hates Polish people. That's why he omitted them in the description of his Battle of Legnica when he could. But in terms of the Asian nations, we do not observe such bias in the writing of Mr. Gumilev. That's why when he describes relation of the steppe between other nations, especially Asiatic nations and Middle Eastern nations, this is very valuable book, offering us more and more information that we didn't know. And for instance, in quotation, Yellow Crusade unsuccessful against Muslim countries is also very much unknown to the Western readers, even the ones who are interested in studying crusading movements. So, very important read from Russia, book by Lev Gumilev. Take care and have a nice evening. Bye.